Hi developers, I'm Hossein Dili at Microsoft MVP. Lots of mobile applications have the requirement to store users' data not locally on the mobile device but on a shared database. That database could be SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle database, or any other database vendors. The way that the mobile device could access that database is through the use of web services. So the understanding of how web services works is really important to develop an application that uses a remote database. So let's explain that concept a little bit here. So here I draw the, let's say, the three components of my application. Let's say here I have the mobile device. It could be an iOS or it could be a Windows device. And then I have the database here. MySQL database. So here, for example, for the mobile application to retrieve the list of employees, for example, it will try to connect to the SQL database. But the request here doesn't go from the device to the database directly, but it passes through the web services. It's an intermediate. This guy here is the web services. The web services will get the request from the mobile device. We'll understand that request, so the mobile device will say, for example, I want to get the list of the employees. These web services have a service, it's a list of services, so it contains lots of services. This request for getting users or for getting the employees will go to the service that is responsible for handling that service. So here, let's say, for example, it's a method for getting employees, for example. So that the web services get that request. It understands that the user the application wants to get the list of the web services, so it will go to the database and ask it to get the list of that web services. So then the query go to the database, and that list of the employees will be retrieved or will be returned by the database. List of employees. So the web services get that list of the employees and return it back to the mobile application. So we should understand these three parts. So the mobile application, or the client application, we call it also, the web services, and the database. So here, between the mobile application and the web services, the communication is done through the HTTP technology. So here, I'll go and draw it. So here it uses HTTP. For that, here we are, in most cases, we talk about REST web services. Those web services that are built on top of HTTP. So here to use HTTP, the mobile application needs some objects or needs classes that could handle HTTP requests and responses. For that, here we'll use a library called HTTP client. You might heard about that. So HTTP client library. we'll install this library later as a NuGet package. After that, between the web services and the database, the communication is done through entity framework. You might hear about entity framework. Entity framework is an ORM that transfers objects or object description of the data into SQL queries and transfers back the SQL query requests to an object-oriented request. So here we use the HTTP technology. Here it's the SQL. It's the SQL. We use the SQL language. The SQL language, we don't use it directly. We can write queries directly to the database. We can say select star from employees table. But in our case, where we will use ASP.NET, we'll use entity framework. Entity framework will wrap these SQL queries for us, and it will handle and it will create these SQL query and execute them inside our SQL database. So to build this application, we'll have two projects. The mobile application, here we'll use Xamarin Forms as a platform for building cross-platform mobile applications. And for the part that have the web services and the SQL database, we'll use ASP.NET Web API. Web API is a platform that enables us to create web services and use a database to store data. So let's start. So we'll have our demo in two parts. So let's bring this schema here. So here we'll have the part where we'll develop the ASP.NET project that have the web API and the database. Then we'll have our Xamarin Forms project that could run on iOS, Android, and Windows. Just to mention that the web services we will build could be also consumed on any mobile or any web platform. So let's start by building the ASP.NET application, and before that let's remember what we have done in the previous demo, which called it Part 1. So in the previous demo, we have created the MVVM structure or the MVVM architecture for our application. So here we have created a model called employee that have a name and department. We have created employee services that have a method called GetEmployees. The method GetEmployees returns a static list of employees. For today, this method will get the employee not as a static list stored inside our application, but will get a list of employees which will be retrieved from our database using through the web services. Also, we have created the main view model that implements a notify property changed interface, so it can refresh the data inside our user interface. Here we have also an employees list, the list that will be retrieved from the database, and it shows that it will use this employees list to show it inside our main page. Here where we have used the binding context to our main view model, and inside that main view model we bind our list view to our employees list here. So as we saw, let's start by creating our web API project that have access to the database and that implements our business logic for our application. For that, I'll go here to my solution, right click, and select Add New Project. Here I'll choose the Web tab here and select ASP.NET Web Application. Make sure you select Web inside Visual C#, the language we will be using in this demo. So inside Visual C#, select Web, ASP.NET Web Application. Let's call it Web App Demo, or let's say Web Services. Web Services Demo. Hit OK. Here we will have some options to choose between some templates. The one we'll use is the Web API. You should also go to change authentication, as here it's set to by default to individual user accounts, so we won't use authentication in this stage, so we'll go and select no authentication. Select OK. Now hit OK. So that our web services demo application was created. Let's go and run that application. So I'll go and select set as startup project. Control F5 to run this project quickly. So here it is, our application contains a page for ASP.NET and contains some other pages for home and API. So let's come back to our application, and here we'll be creating the database that the database and the web services that will do modifications for the database. Those modifications could be retrieving data, deleting data, editing, or updating some data. So as we started in last tutorial, we have created an entity called employee. So if you remember, our employee entity, is the class that contains a name and a department. We will use this same entity inside our web services application. So I'll go and copy this class, or I can go and copy the entire file. So select copy, then I'll go and paste it inside my models. So copy paste. So as I am here, I want to create an application that contains all the list of the employees stored inside a database. So the first thing to do is to create the database. To create the database, we can go and create and use SQL queries. So to create the database, then to create the tables and create the columns inside that table. But ASP.NET with Visual Studio provides a very simple way to create the database, which is done with the creation of our controllers. So the first thing to consider is that if we want to build a database that contains a table for employees, the employees class here will be mapped to the database. As we saw, Entity Framework will handle all these database things for us. So the employee will be mapped to a table inside our database, and it have two columns, the name and the department. And we know for each table should have the ID column. For that, here I'll have to go to the employee inside my web services demo and add another property, which is the ID. So I go and select PROP to create a property. That ID is of type integer, and it's called ID. By the simple fact that I call it ID, the Entity Framework will understand that it's gonna be the primary key for my table. After I have done that, I should go and select Ctrl+Shift+B, or just going and select Build Solution using the Ctrl+Shift+B shortcut. After that, I'll go to the controllers folder here to create a new controller for my ASP.NET Web application. So that I'll click, right click and select Add New Controller. Add New Controller. And here I have a set of options. The first one I'm interested in is the Web API controller with actions using Entity Framework, because this controller is the one that will be used by my mobile application. So I'll go and select Add. Here in this window, I should select the model class, which is the employee entity for our sample here. And here I should select data context class. If I don't have any, then I should go and select new data context. Here I'll call my data context employees context. Select Add. And my controller will be named Employees Controller. Select Add. So here to have created the Employees Controller for us, this controller that will handle all the CRUD operations that will be requested or sent from our Xamarin Forms application. So here we'll have an object that will access our database, which is called the employees context. So for the get request, get employees, here it asks to get all the list of the employees. For that it returns a queryable of employee. The way to retrieve the list of the employees is to go and use the DB object dot employees. This way it will access the database and will look for a table called employees, and it will read all the lines inside that table and return the list of all the employees. We can also perform GetEmployee by ID. So we give the ID of the employee we want to retrieve. Then we use the DB object, access the employees table, then use a method called find ID. This method will try to retrieve the employee which have this current ID. We have also the put employee. This method will try to edit an employee. So we give it two parameters: the ID of the employee we want to edit, then the new values for that employee. And here you notice that it uses db.savechanges as after trying to do some modifications inside the database, you have to do a commit. The commit, the equivalent of commit in SQL, is db.savechanges, an entity framework here. We can also do post employee. This will add an employee to be stored to the database. For that, we are passing an employee entity here. And here it calls the add method that will try to add that employee. Then, of course, it uses save changes to commit that modification. Another thing this web service can do is to delete an employee. For that, it's enough to give it the ID of the employee I want to delete. Then it will go and retrieve that employee. Then it will call the remove method, which will try to remove that employee. So let's try to invoke these web services to test this. So I can go and select Control F5. And you notice here we have these green lines in commands, gives us an idea about how to call these web services. So to call GetEmployees, I should use get and write after it the API employees. So I'll go and copy this value, API employees. So let's select copy. Then here in my web browser, I'll go and paste that value after the URL of my application here. So it's localhost, the number of the port, then /API/employees. So here it returns an XML file which have no data. Why? Because here it tried to access my database and access the employees table, but the employees table is empty, so it have no data yet. For that, it returns no data. So let's try to add some data to our database. So the way to do that, I can go and add a new controller. So I go to controllers, add controller. Then here, the first time we selected Web API controller with actions using entity framework, and this gives us a controller that could be accessed via mobile applications or client applications. But now I'll go and select MVC5 controller with views using entity framework. This controller contains views. Those views will be generated automatically for me. So let's go and select add. And here almost the same information will be asked. So for the model class, it's the employee. And the data context, I'll use the data context that I already created, which is the employees context. Then the controller name, I'll call it employees MVC instead of employees 1. So select add. So now it created the employees MVC controller for me. It contains also the employees context, the object that will access the database, but here you may notice that the difference between this controller and the other one is that the MVC controller inherits from controller and the web API controller inherits from API controller. So the MVC controller have actions, call it index, details. So for index, for example, it will retrieve all the employees list and will show that list inside a view. That view is created here. You see here that inside the views we have a new directory created called employees MVC that matches the name of this controller, employees MVC, and inside this folder we have 5 actions. Each one corresponds to the name of each method here, each action. So each action corresponds to the name of a view here. So for the index, here I have the index view. If I double click the index.cs.html, I can see the implementation or the code behind this view. So you see here is eraser code. So here it's waiting for a list of employees to be given to this index, to this view. Then what it will do, it will go and for each employee it will show its name and its department inside a table. So that's for the index. Now for the details, it will try to get one employee and it will try to show data related to that employee, which are the name and the department. In addition to that, we have the create view. The create view contains a form where I could type the name and the department of the employee. And here I have another method called create, but the difference with the first one is that the first one returns a view. The view which is the form to create the employee, but inside that form, after filling the data for the name and the department, I go and select and click submit. Then the submit button will use this action result. It will go here, it will pass the employee data which were filled from the form, and it will try to add the employee to the database, to the employees table. For that it uses here the db.employees.add_employee. The same thing is for the edit. So here the edit returns a view that contains the employee to be edited. So the view which will be returned contains the data of the employee I want to edit. Then I edit the employee inside that view or inside that form, then click submit. Will go to this second edit here that have the employee to be edited, and here it says the entry for that employee, its state will be set to modified. So this way entity framework will get the new values for that employee, and it will change its state. Almost the same thing for the delete. It gets the employee using by its ID, then it will try to delete it with the remove method here. So let's go and run this application. So for the first controller, the employees controller, we accessed it using this this URL here /API/employees. But to access the MVC controller, we should use this this URL here. So we should write employees MVC without typing API. So I'll go and type employees MVC. You notice here that I didn't write API. So here I get this table that contains information about the employees, about their names and department. And as my database contains no data, I can go here and select create new, and here it will go to the create view, which has a form here where I can type the name of the employee and his department. Let's say I have Hassan working on the marketing department, and select create. By doing that, I have that entry added to the database, and you can see here it's added to this web view also. I'll go and create some other new values. So let's say here I want to add Muhammad for the let's say HR department. Create. Then here I have two values, two rows inside my my employees table. So the same thing, I can go and edit this value. So here, for example, I go and select human resources inside instead of HR, human resources, save. Then here it is human resources instead of HR. So now that those information are stored inside our database, I can come back here to the home page or to this API/employees. By invoking this this web service, we get the list of the employees. At first time it returned no data because we don't have data inside our database, but now we have two entities inside our database. So if I go and refresh this URL, then here I get an XML file that contains information about the employees stored inside the database. So we saw here Muhammad and Hassan working for the marketing and human resources department. Each one have an ID which will be incremented automatically, and Entity Framework handles that for us. So this data is coming from our database. It's here as in XML format, but I can change this format to JSON, which we'll be using later. So a cool feature inside Visual Studio is that I can visualize the data inside the database directly. The way to do that is by going here to Server Explorer. If you don't have Server Explorer here, you can get it in the Views select Server Explorer, View Server Explorer. Then here you go and select Data Connections. Inside the Data Connections, you should get the name of your context, which is employees context in my case here. Here I have the tables and the employees table. Here you see the different columns, the ID, the name, and the department. I go and right click employees to view all the data stored inside that employees, and select show table data. This option will give me the data stored inside my table. So you see here the ID with the name and the department for each entity of my database. So if I go and change this value, let's say here, for example, I want here Marwan instead of Hassan, Marwan. So here I have committed that change to the database directly. So if I go back here and hit refresh, then I'll get the new data. So here you see it's Marwan instead of Hassan. The same here for the employees MVC. I hit refresh. Then here, instead of Hassan, now it's Marwan. So this way, we can see the data stored inside our database using Server Explorer. And we can get that an XML file containing, or a JSON file containing details or all the lists of the employees inside our database. So let's explore this XML file or the JSON file that we can get. Let's explore it inside our mobile application so that we can get this list of information, this list of employees, to view it inside our Xamarin Forms application. So instead of showing this static list of employees, we'll go and show the real data coming from our database through the web services. For that, I'll go to my Xamarin Demo application, the portable class library for my Xamarin Forms applications. And the first thing to do, I'll go to the references, right click and manage NuGet packages. Here we'll install packages that are important to handle HTTP requests to our web service. So I'll go and look for a package called RestClient. So I type RestClient and the name of the package, if I remember well its name. So it should be plugin.RestClient. Hit install. And what this NuGet package will do is it will install all the dependencies I need to build my application, to build requests to my web services. So if you go to references here, you see it installed the newtonsoft.json. This one will let's say it transforms JSON data into .NET objects. And it also installed system.net.http. This namespace or this NuGet package contains all the objects and all the classes that handles or creates HTTP requests. This package also added a folder called RestClient. This folder contains two classes. The first one is RestClient, and the RestClient contains all the data that we need to communicate with the web services. So if I want to get the list of the employees, I go and use this GetAsync method. This method creates an HTTP client. The HTTP client will use a web service URL. So here the URL of my web service. Of course, I should change this one to our local host, and it will go and invoke the getStringAsync method. This one will get the JSON data to our mobile application. Then we'll use JSON convert that comes from the newtonsoft.json NuGet package. We'll use this class JSON convert to deserialize the JSON data to a list of employees. So here this object is using generic types, which is T, that will be resolved, or which will be transformed to our employee entity. So you see, you should see this T, this type, as an employee. So this is getAsync for getting data from our web service. If we want to post data or to add data to our web service, we'll use the postAsync method here, and it contains all the logic code that needs to be written to send an employee to our web services. The same for putAsync, which edits or changes an employee. So we give it the ID and the employee. Then it will do the rest by invoking the HTTP client.putAsync method. At the end, we have the deleteAsync method, which will try and go to delete a certain employee given its ID. So first thing to do here is to go and change this web service to the one matching our localhost web service. So if I come back to my browser here, I should use this URL that gave me this XML file. I'll go and select all this URL, hit copy. Then I use that URL instead of the URL given here. Select copy. Then here don't forget to add the slash at the end. It's required. Select Ctrl S. So now I'll go to use the REST client to retrieve the real list of employees from my database. And I'll insert that list of employees to my employees list of my main view model. So you remember here our employees list, it was getting data from the get employees. And if I click on get employees, this method returns a static list of employees. I no more need that, as I have now a class that gives me the list of the employees from the web service. So I'll go and use that that class, which is called RestClient. So I'll go and create an instance of RestClient. I'm using ReSharper so I can resolve the namespace automatically using Alt-Enter. And here, as RestClient is a generic type, so I should specify the type of T here, which is my employee. I call it RestClient equal new RestClient of type employee. Then here I'll go to use RestClient to invoke the GetEmployeesIcing, which will retrieve the list of the employees, which again I'll store it inside of object, call it employees list. So here, if I put the cursor on top of GetEmployeesIcing, here you should get a hint telling you that this is an async method. It uses the async keyword. So when you call that method, you should use the await keyword here. And with the await keyword, you should change the signature of your method to use the async keyword. And with that also you should change the return type to be of type task of your list of employees. So after doing that, I can go and select return employees list. So this way, my employee services now will call my web services and return the list of employees right from my database, and it will try to show it inside my views. So here another modification I should go and apply. Here, as GetEmployees is an async method, so I should add async here. This is not a must to do, but it's good to respect these conventions, these coding conventions. So whenever you whenever your method uses async, you should add the async prefix here. And I should apply the rename refactoring inside my main view model. So here it's GetEmployeesIcing. But here I get another error telling me that employees list is of type of list employee, but GetEmployeesIcing returns a task. So it's an async method. So here again I should use the await keyword. With the await keyword, I should go and use async keyword. But here I'm invoking an async method inside of the constructor, so I can't apply async keyword with the constructor. I can't do that. The compiler won't accept that. So how can I resolve this problem here? I can go and create another method. Let's call it private task initialize data async, because it's an async method. Here I should add async keyword. So the method initialize data will have this code. So here it's await with the async keyword, and I can call this method from the constructor. Here I don't need to apply await, because it doesn't matter if the employees list will be executed before or after rendering my application. So now if I go and run this application for my Windows devices, let's start by the mobile emulator, Control F5. So you see here it gets the data from our web service, the same data as shown here inside this controller that returns the list of the employees. So the same data here. If I go and try to get that data using my Windows 8.1 application, Control F5, then you see here it's the same data from my database. So here I have implemented the first feature, which is to get data from the database, and if you want to make sure that this is really the data from the database, then you can go here and try to change Marwan here, for example, to Muhammad. Change that again, hit save, then come back to Visual Studio and run your Windows application again. Then you will get, instead of Marwan here, Muhammad for marketing. So this is the first feature in our mobile application that calls web services. So let's revise that process again. So here inside my mobile application I have created an employee services that will try to get the list of the employees to view it inside my main page. The way I get the list of the employees is by using the REST client. The REST client will use two objects, which are the HTTP client and the JSON convert. The HTTP client will create an HTTP request. That HTTP request is uses the verb get. You see here the HTTP client have uses multiple verbs: the get, delete, post, and put, and also send. So here, as I want to retrieve the list of the employees, I use get, the verb get. With that, I pass the URL of my web service so that it knows where my web service is hosted. Then this get string async will return a JSON file for my application. That JSON file will be deserialized using the JSON convert, and it will be deserialized to employees, actually not task models. So I should change this one to employees so you don't get confused. So it's changed to employees. And here the request get string async, it arrived to our web API controller, which is the employees controller here. It arrived to this method get employees. It headed the database and retrieved all the employees data from my employees table. Then the data come back using also HTTP requests. It returned as JSON, then deserialized using JSON convert. That way we got our data inside our Xamarin Forms applications. So I hope this was useful for you, and if you have comments or other questions, if there is any point not clear, then you can mention that the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So thank you.